Okay, so good morning. My name is Jennifer DeMudd, and I am the Executive Director of the Manufacturing Growth Alliance, also known as MGA. My career and passion has been to serve small manufacturers and businesses across the state. MGA is a membership-based organization that champions, serves, and advocates for small manufacturers. We provide services that drive solutions that make manufacturing in Michigan the most competitive and prosperous in the nation. Many of our members have been asking about communication in our ever-evolving landscape. Changes regarding adopting Industry 4.0 technologies, changes within a facility, and how to communicate with external audiences in this environment. Communication is critical to the success to any manufacturer. So before I introduce our presenter, just a few housekeeping items to share with you. I did just start recording our presentation and conversation today. All participants will be on mute until the close of the presentation, where we'll open up the mics, where you feel free to have open dialogue with each other and with our presenter. We do encourage questions and comments throughout Cynthia's presentation. Just type your question in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I'll be monitoring the chat box, and I'll toss those questions out to Cynthia throughout the presentation. Any questions that for some reason we don't get to today, we will absolutely circle back to you within 24 hours and get a response to you. So now I get to introduce our presenter today. MGA has a long-lasting relationship with Cynthia K. and Company Media Production. They are experts in communication and all forms of media. They also have in-depth experience working with manufacturers. Our presenter today is Cynthia K. Cynthia and her company have been honored with many awards, including several Tele and Women-Owned Small Business Supplier of the Year from Siemens in 2018. She has been named one of West Michigan's 50 most influential women 5 times. She is also the recipient of over 30 broadcast awards for UPI, AP, and other news organizations. In addition, Cynthia has authored several books and has been featured on several Cisco chat events. She has written for the Washington Post and has been featured in Time Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine's Ask the Expert, and on NPR. She has also testified on behalf of the National Small Business Association before the House Committee on Small Business. Ooh, and I only shared a portion of her bio. So let's welcome Cynthia. Turn it over to you. Cynthia, thank you so much for being here. Share your screen, and we're looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So first of all, I am really excited to be here. I've known Jennifer for a while. We've worked on Michigan Celebrates Small Business. And so it's really fun for me to be able to get a chance to talk to manufacturers, because I spend a lot of time with manufacturers. And what's been interesting to me is that a lot of the folks that I have worked with over the years, I'm going to call them leaders in 4.0 and digitization. Siemens Industry is a wonderful client of ours, and we have been fortunate to watch their path through Industry 4.0. And what I have found as I've worked with companies is that these companies who are doing really great work in transforming their organizations, there's often a missing piece. And the missing piece is they're forgetting or not maybe capitalizing on all the great work they're doing in terms of communications. And while I know I don't need to tell all of you about Industry 4.0 because that you're living it, you're doing it, I do want to encourage you to maybe look at how communications doesn't get left behind in all of this. And it's easy for that to happen. And I always like to share stories of success and failure. So I'm going to share one of my failures with you. So a number of years ago, the communications business really moves quickly, and systems change and technology changes. And we've really tried over the past 30 some years that I've had the company to be on the forefront of it, to really be a leader in it. And so years ago, if you can remember those VCR tapes that you had, those things you put in your little machines, we would create corporate overviews and product launches and internal communications. And we literally would make hundreds of copies of these VCRs and we'd send them out to businesses. And when DVD came along, my company was like, whoa, this is so cool. We can go from this big thing to this cool little DVD. And so we invested in the technology and we trained our people, and we actually started taking assets of our company, our customers, and transferring them over to the new systems. And then as new projects came in, they automatically went to DVD. Well, one day, a really good customer of mine called me and he goes, Cynthia, I just want to tell you this, that a potential supplier came in, they're trying to get our communications business, and you know, we love you and we're not going to go away from you, but they had this really cool thing that they were doing. They take all your videos and put them on this thing called a DVD. And could we do that? And of course, I'm kind of like trying not to scowl. And I said, well, actually, Ken, all of your videos already are on DVD because we started doing that for you 8 months ago. So my bad that I didn't communicate or didn't communicate well enough, because I know we did communicate it, but that's an example, and I'm a communicator, right? And so that was a really great lesson to me that sometimes all the great work that you're doing within your organizations, you're keeping it there and you're not sharing it. And that's a real disadvantage. So I want to talk today about some of the things that you can do. And I'm going to share my screen here. And can everyone see that? Yes, perfect. So, so what I want to talk about is, why does Industry 4.0 need Communication 4.0? And, you know, if I had that little kind of hiccup with my communication years ago, and that's when communication was really a lot less complicated than it is today, imagine how difficult it is today to get through all of that noise. So I want to talk about what the reality is. So the reality for companies today is this need for speed in communication. My story here that illustrates this is I have a customer that developed a phenomenal new software for automation. And they were selling it, they were working with it. A competitor came out with something. They actually were better at communicating, and they became the standard because they were speeding that communication out. And so what we had to do is play catch up and say, oh, by the way, we have a better system, it's more robust, and we actually developed it before this one. So this need for speed is important. And the need for speed to communicate isn't just when you're launching something. Today, the reality is cybersecurity breaches. You have an event and you have to communicate to your suppliers and your customers what has happened. Perhaps there's a merger, or you're divesting yourself of something, or maybe you have a product recall or some delivery issues. This need for speed to communicate almost instantaneously, people expect that you're going to be up to speed on that. We have a lot of diverse audiences. It used to be you had internal and you had external. Today, you have fractionalized your audiences to the point where you have so many different people you need to speak to. And how you leverage communications and target those people. My example of this is, you go in to talk to someone who knows your company really well, and then you're sharing your story as though you haven't done business with them before. They don't need to hear that. What they need to hear is what's new. So paying attention to what those audiences are. Virtual, I don't even really need to talk about this. We have just seen a huge uptick in the need for people to communicate virtually, mostly because they can't do the face-to-face. Now, I believe face-to-face is going to come back. There's going to be a hybrid here. I really think that that is going to be something that we will see. But in the meantime, amping up virtual communications is important. And then more channels. You know, and when I say more channels, I mean, there are a couple of different ways you can look at that. You can look at, Twitters and email and trade shows and virtual trade shows, but there's lots of different ways that you can communicate. And it's really important that you look at what channels you're using, and frankly, don't use the ones you shouldn't be wasting your time on. So where's the opportunity? I see that there's tons of opportunity for companies that are doing great work. And a lot of it is that I think you want to show people your transformation. I like to say brag a little. It's important to brag. It's important for people to know that you're on the cutting edge. Show what it is that you're doing, because that transformation is really allowing you to better serve them. It's really about your customers. What are you implementing that is going to make it easier for them to do business with you, or improve your accuracy or your productivity or your processes? All of those transformational things are important. For those of you who work in the people side of the business, the HR side, and even those who work on the sales side, we're getting more and more questions about what's the culture. What's the culture of the company? And does your culture fit with the culture of your potential customers and partners? And we're doing a lot of work in sharing, I call them stories. We call it the Siemens story, or the Hegarty story, or the story of why people love what you do and how you operate. And I think people do want to know that. People want to know, what are your values? What are the things that are important to you? Because that shows them what kind of a partner you're going to be. And then this last piece, which I'm going to say is a little bit further up the chain of, basic communications, and you kind of move up, is demonstrating leadership. And this is something that I think a lot of people like to know, that the folks they're doing business with are the ones that are out front in the industry. They're the ones that are kind of pushing that envelope, not too far ahead, but enough that you're really showing someone the way and bringing them along with you. So this opportunity to demonstrate the leadership that you show within either your vertical market or within the industry, or just as a business owner or a business, a good corporate citizen, there's huge opportunity there for people to be able to look at your company and select you as someone they want to work with. So that's kind of the opportunity. So now I like to look at what's happening in our marketplace. And I want you to know that I speak from experience here, because actually over half of my staff are millennials, and I am not a millennial basher. I want you to know that I think these are great people who have wonderful ideas. I love them. They keep me thinking. And the fact of the matter is, they are going to be the largest generation in the labor force. And I think they're gonna actually be more than 75% by 2025, only because what I'm seeing is a lot of folks, due to the recent activities with COVID, we're seeing a lot of people who are wanting to retire even a little bit sooner. They don't want to work in places where they have to wear masks. They don't want to learn new systems of security. So I actually think that's going to move forward a little bit. But as we look at the workplace, you've got this influx of millennials. For the first time in the history of our company, you have 4 generations working side by side. And all of these generations communicate differently. So what you have to look at is, as you're working to recruit new people and retain people, how do you communicate with them? And I think this is a huge opportunity for people. I know as I talk to my customers, the skills gap and their ability to get people in is really becoming more and more difficult. There's huge competition for the folks who are out there. And so I think, recruiting and retaining is something that could be an opportunity. And I'm going to just show you a couple of examples of some work that we've done for folks who would like to do that. So the picture is worth 1,000 words. Why? Because millennials like their devices, right? They're not going to go sit at a computer and look you up on a website. They are going to go onto their cell phone and they want something mobile friendly. And oh, by the way, they don't want you to give them a paper or a brochure. They want to see something. We know the myths. I've done a ton of work with a lot of manufacturers about, you know, manufacturing is dirty, it's boring, you know, you can get injured, you don't make that much money. I mean, all of those myths that we know aren't the reality. We have to dispel those myths in our communication. And then I like to say right from the source. And what that means is when you're recruiting and retaining, as much as they want to hear from people at all levels of the company, they want to hear from the people that are employed there. So let's take a look at a couple things.
There's a lot of misconceptions about what manufacturing is. We want people to come in and to have critical thinking skills and to problem solve and to be innovative.
I like working at Dwy's because it's all hands-on.
Culture is really nurturing.
It's a place where you can come in and be yourself. You don't need to be somebody else. You don't need to put on a facade of trying to be someone else. There's always someone who's willing to listen. That's part of our job, is listening, but as an overall company, I think we do a fantastic job of listening to what our employees have to say and acting on that.
We make things that are in all kinds of different products, from boats to packaging, medical products, comfort products for mattresses, and every customer that we sell to is unique.
All of the employees here are owners of the company, and it's important for people who are coming in the door to realize that, you know, that leaves a higher level of accountability, and we all are in a situation that as the profitability of the company goes up, we all share in that profitability.
So recruiting and retaining is a really good opportunity to use communications. Virtual marketing and promotion. I'm seeing a lot of folks who are trying to take the traditional kinds of things that they do face-to-face and just transfer it to a webinar. And I'm going to tell you that doesn't work. You have to find some ways to really engage people. The good news is that with virtual marketing and promotion, you can actually target and reach more people, because now they don't have to get on a plane. They don't have to leave their work for 2 days to go to a session. So what we are seeing is that some of our folks who have converted from the face-to-face to the virtual are actually getting a lot more people in to listen to the communications. And then the other thing is repurpose and leverage assets. So Jen is recording this. She's going to repurpose this and show this to other people. We're going to leverage the assets of this. And you can do the same things. Things that you create for a webinar, you may be able to use in a one-on-one virtual meeting. So I want you to think about marketing and promotion. And we're doing a lot with awards and those kinds of things. So here's a couple of examples of some things we have done in this area. About what are some of the things that you can do, whether it's an awards program, whether it's a sales meeting, something that is virtual. When it comes to sales, this is a really easy place for you to leverage communications. And the thing that I have found with folks who have sales organizations is that, you know, you have your superstars. You have those people who can go out and just be able to communicate at an extremely high level. You have new people coming in who maybe are not quite as good communicators, or who maybe aren't technically as savvy yet. And so one of the things that if you're using prepackaged communications is you get a consistent message. You're assuring that that end person is going to see something that is the actual message. And I like to think of sales as a toolkit. I recently did something for a building technologies group, and they wanted to create a video. And I went, no, I think we need to make you 5. And of course, he went, oh, 5, how expensive is that going to be? And I said, it's not any more expensive than 1. And they're like, really? Well, sure, because you can create a toolkit where you segment a lot of different things. Maybe one is the features and benefits, and one is a product overview, and one is a look at the people who make the product and how important it is that they do it appropriately. So creating a toolkit and working with someone to figure out what are all the parts and pieces is a really good idea. And then RFP video is a differentiator. So for those of you who respond, and I'd love to hear from you if you do a lot of responding to RFPs. One of the things that we have found that has, I wish I could have 0.1% of the dollars that some of these companies have made with the videos we've created. One example is a Siemens group actually got a worldwide contract with Dow for sales and service because we created this really cool little video that got them into the next phase. I'm not saying the video does it all. It doesn't. That'd be unrealistic. But it's that thing that kind of sets you apart, and it makes them think about you differently because you created something just for them. So think about how can you create some really targeted communications. Yes.
CK, how would a manufacturer know if they need to improve their communications? Are there any indicators out there that they can say, oh, yeah, I can see that?
One of the easiest ways, honestly, and we actually do this for people, is we do what I call a communications audit, where we'll take a look at some of the things people are doing and give them, it's kind of like somebody came in and did an energy audit for you and said, here's where the gaps are. Here are the things you probably need to do. But conducting a communications audit, looking at the materials, looking at what it is you're developing, and frankly, the quality of what you're developing is something that I think is really important, because in a lot of cases right now, that video is your presence because you can't get into that room with that person. And so I think that you need to kind of amp that game up. But for some people, they're already creating communications and they just need to be freshened up and tweaked and have maybe some higher production level. For some people who are not creating anything, there's some really simple things, and I'll talk about that. But it is definitely, if you're not doing video today, I'll be honest with you, you're way behind the game, because we live in a YouTube world. Everyone wants to go see a video about something, or hear someone talk about a product, or see the CEO of the company and know who that person is. So I would, I just strongly encourage you to look at, and you can start small, but doing some things that will help you increase that brand awareness and your presence in the marketplace. And I know I'm covering a lot of ground.
We saw a lot of U.S. manufacturers struggling with what to do around digitalization. They recognize that something's going on, something very significant, a convergence of many different technologies that all fall under the umbrella of digitalization, but most of them didn't know what to do about it and where to go.
Other PICVs change flow by adjusting the stroke. When flow is reduced, the stroke is diminished. Siemens gives you full control and stroke performance regardless of the maximum flow setting.
The manufacturing engineering community is looking at multiple alternative concepts. We can improve the process in the virtual world by making different tool design changes or process changes, workstation layout changes.
We're on the leading edge of being able to really create what we call the digital twin, not only of the product, not only of production, but also of the entire process.
So I'm showing you a lot of things, and some of them are more highly produced than others. I think the key piece of it is what is it that you're doing that's transforming your organization? And then really the key to communicating is that not what does it do for you, but what does it do for your customer? It's that 180. Why is it that the improvements that you're making or the things that you are doing going to make your business more sustainable and resilient so that you're going to be the partner that they want to choose? And I think that we've learned that as we've worked with our customers. One of the things that they talk to us a lot about is they've invested a lot of time and energy, and we are in their systems, and they want to work with us, and they want to make sure we're going to be around. So what are we doing to make sure that we're sustainable? So I spend a lot of time talking to my customers about things that I'm doing today that even though they may not need it today, they're going to be able to use that. So that sales piece of it, I think, is another opportunity. Training is big.
There's a few chat comments that sometimes when you turn your head a little bit, your audio cuts out a little bit. Just an FYI for some of the audience.
Okay, so training is another thing that I think a lot of people are spending time on. We learned this really firsthand this last year. I'm going to talk about hard skills, and you see some examples here of some things we've done in safety, because safety has just become hugely important as we look at organizations trying to make sure that they aren't going to have to shut down due to outbreaks of COVID, but also just basic safety. And, plant safety or visitor safety has become something. So training people on hard skills, and it's not just safety. You bring a new machine in and you need to train someone on how to operate that machine. That's a really simple thing to do. And that frees up your training staff so that every time someone new comes in, they don't have to go back out on a plant floor to train someone to do something. It's figuring out where those opportunities are to make the most out of your people, where they do something once and you then have repeatability. The other thing that we're doing a lot in right now is training of soft skills. And I think this is something that maybe we took for granted years ago, but those of you who have children will know that they're like always doing this. Everybody's on there. And we're finding that people are starting to lose their soft skills. The ability to have a conversation, the ability to listen to someone, the ability to think real time and problem solve as you're talking to someone. These are all things that are skills that if we don't use them, they go away. So I'm actually doing a lot of soft skills training with sales folks, with call center people, with communications people, HR people who have to explain things like benefits. So soft skills is an area. That's all internally focused, but let's talk about what you can do for customers. My best example of this would be Bradford White. Bradford White has a portal that they call For the Pro, because all of their products can only be installed by professional people in the heating and cooling industry, plumbing. So what they've done is they've created this really robust portal for their people. They could go on, and if they're in the field and they're installing something and they need to troubleshoot it, they literally pull up this little video that talks them through how to do it. Or let's say they're trying to program a new unit, it'll walk them through it. Maybe they're trying to make a buying decision between this model and this model. There's a video on the features and benefits that helps them do that. There's a video that helps them explain to their customer why it is that having a Bradford unit is important. So these portals where people can go and you can give them the resources are a huge differentiator in people wanting your product, because not only are you selling it to them, but you're educating them. So you might want to think about some of those things.
Hey, before we jump off to the next topic, first, your audio is a ton better, so that's fantastic. The question focuses in on the training component. You had mentioned for manufacturers that are bringing in a new machine, or maybe an industry 4.0 new technology. How do you have an idea of how much retention is on that content? So the rate at which an individual can learn a new machine if video is introduced into that process.
Yeah.
Do they learn it faster?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. But here's the key piece to it. When you create the asset and then they have access to the video, what you find is that if they get to step 2 and they have forgotten how to do step 2, they can go back and look at the video. And I'll give you just an example of this from my own life. I bought an exercise bike recently, and it came in many parts and pieces. And there was a manual there that showed me how to put it together, which was totally useless because it just didn't give me what I needed. So I went on YouTube, looked up the manufacturer, found a video, did a step, stop. I actually put those parts together, watch the next step, stop. So there's just a huge benefit in doing this. And I will tell you, it's not just at the machine level. It's also about changing culture. When Herman Miller years ago went to the Toyota production system, went to Lean, I read all the books on Lean because they knew this was going to be a huge culture shift for their employees. And we sat down and we actually developed a program to talk to them about why the new way of working was going to benefit the company, them as individuals, and the customers. So and that may not be a hard skill, although it did translate to the work they were doing. But think about what it is that you're asking people to retain these days. And I also look at it as you're building this bank of assets that as people leave and new people come in, they have this bank of training materials that are there that become kind of that kickoff. Now, that doesn't mean they don't need people. But what it does mean is that you're reducing the workload of those supervisors and trainers. Does that help?
Yeah, that absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So the one here that gets a little sticky is where I talk about communication and thought leadership. And I think people don't maybe understand the big picture of thought leadership. Thought leadership is not about selling something. Thought leadership is not really about talking about what it is that maybe you're doing today, but thought leadership is taking it up to that 30,000 point of view. So I'll give you some examples from things that we have done. So there's a nonprofit in our area called Kids Food Basket. And what they do is they provide sack lunches and suppers to children who are literally hungry, who don't have the opportunity to have what we call food security. So they do a great job, but they wanted to take it beyond just what they do, that transactional piece. And they gathered together in this upper picture the CEOs of a number of different hospital systems. And they talked about how does food insecurity impact health of not only that child, but their families. And I mean, it was a fascinating discussion, even if you knew nothing about it. And we actually took this piece and we created a video and a podcast and some social media clips. Bone Health, Dr. Diana Bittner, she's one of the most recognized experts in women's health. And so she wasn't talking specifically about individual treatments, but about overall health and wellness. A3, which some of you may know as the premier organization for automation. And they are actually going through a complete rebrand, but they are the big promoters of Automate in Chicago, where you see all of the automation and the new things that are happening. They do a number of business forums where they invite leaders of companies, or they invite industry experts, where they invite media people, and they talk about the future of robotics, or the impact of automation on small business, or so it's a big bucket topic that they're providing some thought leadership on. So now the question is, okay, well, what does that do for you if you become this thought leader? Well, for one thing, we know it impacts the RFPs you get, because people see your name, they see your company, they know you are a leader. And we know that from, and not just anecdotally, but as they do research on this, that it impacts how many times you get put on that RFP list. And if any of you know anything about it, just getting on the list is the hard part. I know that for a fact. Once you're on the list and you're good at what you do, it's easy, but getting on the list is the hard part. So it impacts the invites, the wins, and also the pricing, because when people see the value that you bring, they're willing to maybe not make it a price decision, but a value decision. We are seeing thought leadership moving away from print to video. It used to be everybody did white papers or case studies on things. What we're now seeing is people want to see a video. They want to see how what you did actually impacted an organization. I don't think that means you don't do the white paper. I still believe in the toolkit. I love to have that. Okay, here's the print if somebody doesn't want to see the video. Here's the video for those who would prefer it. But boy, there's nothing, especially in your businesses, where you can see stuff moving and you see people making things. People love that. It's a behind the scenes look at things. So I think having that thought leadership and talking about how you're doing things is important. And these are just some of the tools: podcasts, vlogs, and all a vlog is a blog that you've done on video, and social media clips. And I will tell you, for almost every single thing that we are doing right now for our customers, we are in that whole process, taking out social media clips and using them to tease people to read more or see more. And it's really effective, because unfortunately our attention spans today are not great. So that's just some of the things that, as you start to think about down the road, how do you become this thought leader? So now if we look at this, we're down to our checklist. And I love this quote. It's one of my most favorite quotes. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. George Bernard Shaw. And today it's actually still the same thing. If I say, do you want, how soon do you want me to create this video? I can do it in 2 to 4 weeks. What do people hear? They hear 2. Yeah. And the illusion that I'm doing is, oh, I'm giving them a range. No, that's not what they heard. So we have to really think about what it is that people actually hear. So let's talk about your checklist. I guess what I want to tell you, and obviously I'm a communicator, I'm going to say this, but I know it works because I've seen it work, is that communication is essential to your strategy. It is not just about sales and marketing. Everybody thinks about it there, but communication is really about making sure that if you have an initiative in some area of your company, that you are communicating to all of your employees why that initiative is important. Otherwise, they don't know why they're doing the work. And we see from studies that have been done that employees sometimes feel like they don't know what's going on. And if they don't know what's going on, what's the incentive for them to actually do their job? So I want you to think about, as you're working on strategy, are you bringing your communications person in? Are you bringing in an outside resource if you need them? Because it's a lot easier for them to sit in on a strategy meeting and to understand where you're going and then be able to communicate it than to try and have to catch up. So think about, where can you infuse communication into your strategy? And the second one is, it's developing a mindset. If you think it's not important, or you think it'll just happen, well, it's not going to happen. But if you have a communications mindset, I will tell you, we have a communications mindset here. Every single person in my organization could probably step up and do this presentation, because they all understand what we do and how we communicate it. And if you develop that mindset that you want to communicate and share, I think you're going to find that the benefit to the bottom line is huge. The third thing is I want you to think about relevant tactics. And not everybody needs to do social media. Not everybody should have a blog. Maybe you want to use targeted emails. I really think that you need to focus on a couple of channels and do them really well. But don't try to do everything, because if you do, unfortunately, I think everything suffers. So you don't want to just be scattered in your approach. I like to talk to people about phases. If your website is great and you start to do some really good email communications, all right, maybe now you want to build some seminars, or maybe you do want to do some social media, but take some baby steps. And I really caution this. I talk to leaders a lot about, if it isn't a priority for you, it isn't a priority for anybody. And I go, but first coffee, So as leaders and executives and people who are in positions of authority, you have the ability to influence in a way that others do not. I'll give you a really good example of this. As I've worked with companies to put together presentations to go out and get business, I've often said, why isn't your CEO, or why isn't your VP of operations or whatever doing a personal video message to them? And I have found this extremely effective, because the CEO or the head of sales or the head of marketing cared enough to talk to someone. So leadership communication is probably one of the most important factors that influences business success. And it doesn't happen overnight. And I know lots of leaders prefer not to do it, but I really think you need to look at all levels of your organization. And there are times when having the leader be the communicator honestly makes the difference. So those are some really good opportunities. So the reality, things are moving faster. The opportunity, lots of places where you can infuse communication into your strategy and into all of the activities within your organization. And then the checklist, looking to see, do you have the mindset? Do you have a plan in place? And do you have a way to execute that? So that's kind of why I think Industry 4.0 needs Communication 4.0. And I'd love to just take a couple of questions if we have them.
Yeah, we're going to open up the mics here for all of you while we wait for the mics to get open. CK, another question came in, and it specifically was related to the tactics, so the marketing tactics. How do manufacturers which tactic is best step to do while trying all of them? So how do they know where to even begin?
Okay. So let's take a manufacturing line and something that you have done to improve a process. Okay, if it's something that's really visual, if you can show, I'll give you an example. Mercedes-Benz, I went to their plant to do a video. We were able to show the before and the after. And that visual was so amazing that you almost didn't even need to say anything. All right, so if you've got something that's highly visual, then I would say the immediate tactic is to create a video short on that, right? Now, let's say it's something that has needs a lot of explanation. All right, it's something that isn't a really simple thing for people to see. In that case, a blog or a blog may be supported by visuals. Is that what I like to try and do is say to people, tell me what it is you're thinking, and then let me give you the options, because everybody is unique. And often, I mean, I know it sounds like I'm pushing video. There are times when I tell people don't do video. This is not the opportunity for that. You would be much better off to do something else. But it really depends on, and here's the other thing, it depends on how big of a project this is. If you're doing a huge product launch, I say you throw everything at it. You need print, you need video, you need some campaigns, the email campaigns. You need to really go out there with a blast. If it's a smaller enhancement to something, maybe you don't need all of that. So it's really looking at what's going to be the return on the investment that you're going to get for what you do.
Great, thank you. Everyone should be unmuted. So if you have a question, feel free. Denise, I think you posted a question in the chat box. Do you want to, is that question still valid?
Yes. So Cynthia, what size of video, what's the length of video you recommend? Are we talking a minute or less, or what's the standard?
Well, and okay, so for different uses, the standards are different. I will tell you for promotion, we're talking 90 seconds. And then with 2 15-second social media clips that lead you to the longer thing. For training, obviously it's going to be longer, but what I will tell you with training that we're doing is we're breaking training into modules. So it's not one long continuous thing, but it's shorter modules that people can, watch again, move on. So in a case like that, I mean, we've done some things with new installations and that have been an hour or more. So it really depends on the content. What I say to people is don't think about how to create X. Think about how much content do you need? What platform are you going to put it on? And that will dictate what the length is.
Makes sense. Thanks, CK.
I have a question. So at the beginning of the webinar, you talked about telling a brand story. And so I was wondering if you have any tips for everybody on the call to kind of help them figure out or determine what their best stories are or what their most compelling stories are to reach their customers, because you might think that you have a really unique story, but everybody else is telling the same one. So I guess, how do you determine what your most unique story is and what's most relevant to your customers?
Yeah, and honestly, this is really, we're doing a lot of brand communications for some of our larger companies. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because I think, as you say, you love a customer or you love a story and you think it's really good. And then we go out and we go, yeah, it's not really that great of a story. So one of the things that I look at is what's the wow for it? There's this wow factor that you get with something, which means you've got something that nobody else can say. You've improved. Okay, I'll give you an example. You went from being able to detect a cybersecurity threat in 2 weeks down to detecting a threat in less than 2 hours. Cisco has been able to do that. That's a wow, right? That's a huge wow. So what's the differential? But the other thing is sometimes your story may sound a lot like someone else's story, but you've got this wonderful person who just, I mean, they're so camera friendly and they tell such an emotional story that it almost doesn't matter if it sounds a lot like someone else's story, because that person is so engaging. So we look at that as another factor. The other thing that we look at is shelf life. We look at, is it something that is going to be as impactful 6 months from now as it is today? So there's some factors that we will look at when we're talking about stories. Another is diversity of customers. As you're looking at your customers, if all of your customers are big, huge customers, I get this. They go, oh, you work with Siemens. Well, you probably can't work with a small manufacturer. And I go, no, wait. We work with a lot of small manufacturers. So if all I talked about were big and I didn't talk about some of our smaller customers or show some of their examples, that would be a problem, because then I'm putting myself in a bucket. So there's kind of this formula, but the last thing I would tell you is it's not a one-time thing. Brand awareness and brand stories are not one story. They are a collection of stories that when you put them all together has this body of work that shows why you're the obvious choice that people want to do business with.
All right, we have time for one more question. We promised we'd close a few minutes early so you can transition. Is there another question out there? Otherwise, I have a question, but I'd like to hear from you if there's a question.
I've done such a good job that there are no questions.
Well,
there you go.
Well, let me toss out the one question that I thought of early on in your presentation, CK. You know, MGA works with a lot of manufacturers, and attracting and retaining talent is so critical to their growth. Do you have an estimate or a guesstimate of how impactful is it to add video into your attraction efforts? You know, like a message from the CEO or a message from the employee saying, this is a great place to work. It's not, you know, dirty. It's not, you know, you're not going to get hurt. This is innovative, fun, exciting. How much does that impact the attraction effort?
Honestly, it's huge. And I'll tell you why it's huge right now. If I say something, it's one thing. If the folks who work here say something, then it must be true. And so what we're finding as we go into places, and we are doing a lot of this, is we're saying we want to interview people at every level of the organization. I want to interview the woman who runs the tour wiki, and I want to interview the supervisor who is doing, and the quality person. People like to see people because then it humanizes that organization. And we sometimes even talk about the things that are difficult. I did a series of things for Hegarty Insurance, and quite honestly, they wash people out because people are in call centers and it's a very tough job. And we talked about the things that are difficult to do, but we also showed how it's a path to somewhere else in the company. So I love using people and having them talk about why they love the culture or the organization. And the other thing that I also encourage people to do is get your customers to tell your story. There is nothing more impactful than a customer saying what a great job you did for them and why they love to work for you. It's that third-party endorsement. And so I believe really strongly in that. It's that people factor. Okay.
You're on mute there, Jen.
You're on, that, by the way, that is the phrase of 2020. You're on mute.
You know, that's funny because I've been watching so closely throughout our conversation. And for Christmas, I got a candle actually from Connexus Group, a local supplier. The candle says you're on mute. And my children are like, why does that say you're on mute? I'm like, all right, I'll explain it later. But just want to close out here. Thank you so much, CK, for the conversation. We truly appreciate you spending time with us today.
Yeah.
For our participants that are still on the call, we'll follow up with an email, provide you with the link to this conversation, information regarding that communications assessment that Cynthia mentioned, as well as the communications checklist, and of course, contact information for Cynthia.
Okay.
You have my contact information. You can always find us on ngalliance.org if you're looking for more information on how NGA can help your manufacturing business. So have a
And
wonderful
thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jennifer.
Cynthia. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
see ya.
Bye.